Welcome back. In this section, we're going to continue working through our color, starting with scene 2. If you want to follow along, I'm working on project 5D scene 1 done. You can import that and connect that like we have throughout the training. So let's start with shot 18 here. We're going to pick a key shot from this scene and make sure that it matches with our key shot from the rest of the movie. Generally, it's good to pick a shot with a face. This is probably the closest we have to a face in scene 2 here. So let's compare this with our other shots here. We have the scene 1 hero. And this isn't going to match completely because the environments are so different. But the question is, does this look like it's the same world? Let's play this other still. Is it believable that these two things live in the same universe? And when they're so different, it's kind of hard to tell. So let's go back and play through this again. Start with shot 15. So we've had a lot of blue and green tones. We have a lot of just really desaturated, pretty much everything's desaturated here. And I'd say we could probably go just a little bit more green overall, especially with this shot. So why don't we just add another node here? And this one is just going to be just making things a little bit more kind of greenish in the lift. And let's label this green, greenish. Just, I still want that kind of greenish, uncomfortable tone. And I'll select this node and hit Control C. And then on our other shots here, I can hit Control V and add a little more green. Again, let's play this still. It's maybe just a little heavy now because there are some kind of green tones throughout this, but it's maybe not quite that intense. I'd say let's dial this back just a little bit. Let's take our key output gain and just bring it back to like halfway or so. So now we have just a little push towards green. It's not over the top, something like that. So let's copy this greenish node. And I'm just adding a new serial node and pasting that look here. Over everything. And I'm not just selecting all of these in middle button mouse clicking because I think we went through and kind of balanced these a little more. Although this one is a little bit bright, so I think we'll take that down just a little. It should all be about the same brightness. So in this first node, we're just going through and making sure everything kind of feels like the same tone. This could maybe just take a little bit more contrast. Okay, this one maybe feels a little too blue, so I'm gonna just bring it towards the green a touch. Yeah, so now, I mean, if we switch through, we can kind of see, all right, these all match up a little better. Now we can start getting more picky with our secondaries. So I'm gonna hit Alt-S, make a new serial node here, and what don't we like about this shot? I'd say it's fine. We can probably brighten her up in this mirror a little bit. So let's label this mirror and go to our windows, and I'll probably just do a circle window. And now we're going to learn a little bit about tracking. So if you remember from Fusion, this is like a much easier, much simpler version of tracking. The idea is that we can stick one of these color correction windows to things that are moving in the shot. And the way that we do that is with this fifth palette over here, the tracker palette. Right now, this little drop down says window. You can also do stabilization. You can also track things for your open effects and everything. which we aren't going to get into right now, but as long as this is on window and this is on clip, which is the default, everything should be good. You don't even really need to open this palette most of the time because you can select whatever you want and just hit Control T on the keyboard and check this out. It'll track that forward. I'll hit Alt T and track it backwards. So Control T for forward, Alt T for backwards, and then boom. It's like automatically a pretty darn good track. This is like the easiest tracker in the whole world. You just have your window selected and hit Control T for forward, Alt T for back, and it's done. You've selected it. So now we can make this kind of soft selection here in the middle of our mirror. And then we could do something like go to the curves and just boost this up a little bit, boost up the midtones. And now here's the difference. Here's before and here's after. And this sticks to that mirror. So it might be just a little much. Let's bring this down just a touch. It's just a little much. We can also maybe add some sharpening because I doubt that we hit the focus like perfectly here. Yeah, easy way to add a little bit of sharpening. This just helps with faces and eyes and things. Is down here in our center palettes, the 7th one over is the blur palette, which I know is the opposite of sharpen. But here where it says radius, if you push this up, it will blur things. And if you take it down, it will sharpen things. So check this out. So if I push this up, it's going to blur everything, right? But I'm going to take this down just a little bit. And I'm talking like just a little bit, like 0.48, 0.47. And now that kind of sharpens her eyes a little bit. So let's take a look here. Here's with the sharpening and here's without. Just a little tiny bit of clarity is all we want. And the reason we only want a little bit is because this sharpening, it's really easy to overdo it, basically. If you have something that is really soft focus, you can sharpen it, but it's almost better to leave it soft sometimes than to over sharpen it. Because if we take this radius all the way down, let's see, to like here where it's starting to get sharp, where it's actually starting to look sort of sharp, you can just kind of tell. It has like these little rings around it, sort of. It's kind of hard to tell in this transcoded footage, but it just makes the edges really harsh. And so almost always, like usually, you want to keep this, like if 0.5 is no adjustment at all, like 0.48, 0.47 is about as low as I go on this radius to sharpen things. And that'll just help clarify this a little bit. And then I think that's all we really want to do for this shot. I think that's fine. We're going to copy this node, this mirror node. I'll hit Control C and go to shot 21, which is the other mirror, and hit Alt S again, hit Control V. And now that copies that over, but it also copies over the tracking, which is not what we want. So let's just place this window over here. We can actually just reset this window. I'll go down to our palettes here and hit these 3 dots and say reset selected window. Now that gives us our default window here without any tracking or anything. And we'll select this again and hit Control T. And that's kind of staying on her eyes, which is great if we were tracking directly her eyes, but we might not want to do that. So we're going to do something real tricky here. We're going to do an offset track. So an offset track is basically selecting something that moves the same way as whatever you're wanting to track, but it's less problematic. So we're just going to select this bottom part right here because it doesn't have her eyes moving around. I'll hit Control T, and that'll move along with the camera and everything the same way, but it's not going to be thrown off by her eyes moving. And then once we have this tracked, we can move this up and look, it sticks. Isn't that great? So now we can kind of soften this and everything, and that will stay right there on her face. Here's without, and here's with it. Very subtle, very soft. And I think that's going to work pretty well. Okay. Let's take a look at this second shot, shot 19. What do we think? Honestly, I don't know if I'd do anything. I mean, we could maybe brighten the phone. We'll brighten the phone just real quick. Alt S to make a new node. We'll call this phone, and we'll select it with circle window. Hit Alt T because we're at the end of our shot here. That'll track it backwards. And then we can kind of soften this out a little bit. And then maybe we can just brighten it a little bit here with our curves. We probably don't need to. It's not that important really, but if you want to, you could do something like that. And now we have the phone brightened up a little bit. Real similar thing for this shot, but this I actually do want to darken, especially these edges, because it's hard to tell what to look at here, and we really want people to look at this photo. So Alt-S for a new serial node, we'll call this photo. And yeah, the first thing we're gonna do is grab this photo, Control-T, Alt-T, and then soften this out, do our curves thing. And I'm going to give it a little bit of contrast just so it clarifies it a little bit. And we're going to sharpen it. So in the blur palette, roll down a couple with my mouse, 0.47 or so. Here's before, here's after. It is going to be a little blurry, and there's not a lot we can do to fix that, but that's where we're at. So one thing we can do is darken these edges so that it draws the eye a little bit more toward this photo. So I'll hit Alt-P to make a parallel node along with our photo. And let's label this vignette, because we're just going to add a simple vignette here. And here's something that's neat. We could track this again because it's super quick, but let's say you didn't want to. We can copy the track data from this window. If we select that and go over to our 3 dots here, we can say copy track data, and then go to our other node, and we'll add a circle node here. And then again, down here in the dots, paste track data. And what that'll do is move this along with our shot using that same track data, but we're gonna make this a big soft window, rotate it like this. Down here, we'll invert our selection, and then we'll just push down in the gamma a little bit, maybe down in the lift. So now we're just darkening the edges of this shot. And because it's tracked, it doesn't look weird, moves along with it. I think that works great. All right, kind of a similar thing for the gun here. One thing I think we should do is add a little bit of, again, a soft vignette right here, just because I want to darken the foreground, give it a little more depth. We don't really need to look at all this other stuff as much. We really need to look at the gun though. So Alt-S, let's again just do a little light on the gun. So node label, let's call this gun. And this is really the same thing. This is like, this process I find is most of the secondaries is like, select something with a circle window, track it. Go to your curves, add a little bit of contrast. That goes a long way. Okay, Alt-P, same thing. Let's do a big soft vignette. Something like that. We don't want to overdo the vignette. We don't want to do something like this where it's just really, really dark like that. That's overdoing the vignette, everybody. It looks cool as a still, but once it moves, you're gonna be like, dude, you just put a huge vignette on that. And we don't want anybody to say that. We want people to care about the movie, right? So we're gonna take our vignette and we're gonna make it really soft, really subtle, tasteful, okay? So when you turn this off and on, you should notice it, but you shouldn't be able to notice like the lines, you know? It shouldn't be so easy to see like the transition. It should be really soft. So before and after, the edges get darker, but you're not really sure where that stops or starts. That's good. I think we'll move this up just a touch. Just adds a little bit of depth. That's good. Okay, let's go to our next shot. Hands on the steering wheel. I think that works okay. Again, we're comparing it with our other shots. See how it looks. The only thing I'd say is her skin looks a little washed out, which would make sense if it's really bright out here. We might be able to do a little bit of work on the skin though. Let's just see. I'll hit Alt-S. Maybe we can just take a hue versus saturation curve, sample her skin here, and just push up the saturation a little. That just brings a little more color to her skin. It's pretty subtle, but I like it. I think it's nice to kind of see that. And then maybe we'll also do, let's see, let's call this skin. And then we'll hit Alt P. And maybe we could just add a little window here like this. And just do a little bit of contrast just to bring that down a little bit. So here's before, here's after. Just adds a little bit more shadow to the skin tones. I think that works pretty well. Here's our shot without any secondaries really. And then this is what we've done. Just add a little more color to her skin, a little bit more contrast here. I think that makes it look really nice. Okay, that is scene 2. Let's go on to scene 3.